groups continue to incite violent protests and impede the enforcement of our immigration laws. We will examine how groups, primarily on the left, and even elected officials at the federal, state, and local level continue to vilify immigration enforcement officials who are simply carrying out their duties required under the law. We'll discuss how the mainstream media gaslights the public about the true scope of criminal alien activity in the United States. But first, let me take a moment to remind everyone how we got to this point. President Biden invited millions of unvetted illegal aliens into the United States. These included hundreds of thousands of criminal aliens, violent gang members, and even individuals on the terror watch list. And where did these aliens go? They went to neighborhoods in major cities across the United States. These criminal aliens took up residence in states, counties, and cities that call themselves sanctuary cities, like Los Angeles, Portland, and Chicago. Sadly, many of these communities have suffered for decades under the weight of failed policing mandates. The influx of millions of illegal aliens exacerbated the failure of these policies, resulting in skyrocketing crime. Local residents have begged their elected leaders to reverse course and to address rising crime, but to no avail. To add insult to injury, imagine their surprise when they learned that these Biden-era illegal aliens were prioritized for all types of public services, including housing, schooling, and medical care funded by their tax dollars. In some cities, police departments were hamstrung by budget cuts in order to prioritize spending on illegal immigrants. Thankfully, President Trump has listened to these concerns and fulfilled one of his most important campaign promises: to secure the border and remove illegal aliens from the United States. Aggressive immigration enforcement is not unprecedented, nor is it a particularly partisan issue. The reality is that President Obama, who was once praised for unifying the country, deported more than 2.5 million illegal aliens, earning him the title, the deporter-in-chief, at some point. But ever since President Trump was sworn into office and began prioritizing immigration enforcement, assaults and attacks on immigration agents and officers have skyrocketed. These immigration officers are law enforcement officers that are doing what their country has asked them to do, which is to enforce our laws, just like every other law enforcement officer. They carry out their sworn duties to uphold the law and arrest those who violated our laws. And make no mistake, we're talking about the arrests of criminal aliens who have committed some of the most heinous crimes: murder, rape, sexual abuse and molestation of children, aggravated robbery and assault, kidnapping, human smuggling, theft, and even acts of terrorism. But you don't have to take my word for it. DHS has published dozens of press releases highlighting the criminal aliens whom ICE and CBP have apprehended. These criminal aliens were hiding in the United States, some for years, and were allowed to continue terrorizing American communities. DHS has reported that currently more than 415,000 illegal aliens in the United States already have criminal convictions. 415,000. Of that number, nearly 400,000 aren't even detained. They're still out there somewhere in our neighborhoods wreaking havoc. There is, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation spread among the American public by the news media and the social media, especially regarding the current laws that authorize our immigration enforcement officers and what they are allowed to do and what they're required to do, and why they have to go into these communities to arrest illegal aliens, especially in so-called sanctuary cities. Immigration enforcement officers are well-trained, and many with years of experience. The only reason that ICE and CBP must go out in our streets and seek out and arrest criminal aliens is because sanctuary cities simply refuse to cooperate with law enforcement and allow them to be transferred directly from jail if detained. According to the Center for Immigration Studies, there are currently 12 sanctuary states and more than 200 sanctuary cities and counties across the United States. Many of them have passed laws that prevent their police department from cooperating with immigration enforcement or sharing information about detained or incarcerated aliens or honoring DHS detainers. Consequently, criminal aliens are often released back into their communities, inevitably to reoffend rather than being detained before being placed into custody. This practice is not only defies common sense, but it makes the role of immigration enforcement officers much more difficult and, in the end, more painful for these communities. The mainstream media, unfortunately, has shown no willingness to educate the public. Instead of reporting these realities truthfully, mainstream media outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and ABC have ignored the real harm that these criminal aliens have caused in these communities and instead directed their ire toward law enforcement. I want to be sure, however, to praise those reporters who do their job honestly, who've called out false statements when they see them on social media or otherwise. That is also an important function of the media, and it does not go unnoticed. Here's one example where Bill Malugin of Fox News points out a social media post depicting an infant with handcuffs on as false, which is, of course, comes from TikTok. TikTok is owned by the Chinese government in part and operates under the rules set by the Chinese Communist Party and is famous for their propaganda and disinformation efforts. But here's an example of how TikTok is sowing dissension among Americans by suggesting somehow that U.S. law enforcement officials are doing things like detaining an infant, and it looks like even putting them in handcuffs, which is obviously a false statement, false depiction. We also know that some of our Democratic colleagues have used incendiary rhetoric to fan the flames of public protests that are anything but mostly peaceful. The result has been widespread assaults on our law enforcement officers. Protesters and criminal aliens have physically attacked officers. Officers have been pepper sprayed, choked, punched, or even injured to the point of hospitalization. Protesters have made violent threats against ICE officers, comparing them to fascists and Nazis, inciting more violence against immigration officers who are, again, simply doing the job that Congress has asked them to do. They are enforcing federal laws. They've rammed officers with vehicles, thrown tear gas, smoke grenades, rocks, bottles, and even punched and shot at our ICE officers. Left-wing protesters have laid down in the road in an attempt to prevent vehicles from belonging to law enforcement from entering or leaving detention facilities and even slashed the tires on government vehicle cars, all to prevent ICE and CBP from doing their jobs. These groups have also interfered with the capture of illegal aliens, including facilitating the escape of a convicted child rapist and an alien convicted for narcotics and weapons possession. Some of these protesters are outright lunatics, and I don't use this word lightly. Anyone watching the news has seen protesters from every corner of the radicals' left base. We've seen everything from straight-up thugs committing physical violence to activists dressed as dinosaurs and rabbits, and in some costumes that I won't even hazard a guess as to what they are trying to represent. We've even seen some dancing grandmas trying to stop enforcement of our immigration laws, one Jane Fonda dance move at a time.
5, 6, 7, now through the grapevine.
Well, suffice it to say, some of these activists have become so divorced from reality as to be characterized accurately as unhinged. But when you give protesters information about who is being targeted and why, suddenly they see the wisdom of this action.
Hey, y'all, be careful. They're arresting people at work here. Hard-working Americans who build, the ones who do all your landscaping, work on your cars, fix all your stuff. They're coming out here taking them all. They're coming out here just taking everybody at work. Be careful, everybody. Don't go to work today.
Where you work, child sex crime stuff.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Never mind. Weirdo. Never mind. Beto.
Many of us look to law enforcement officers for protection in cases of robbery, burglary, or assault. Why can't we extend the same level of respect to law enforcement officers who carry out our other laws that Congress has passed, like our immigration laws? The left sometimes calls themselves the party of the people, but they don't seem to have much regard for their fellow man and woman when they engage in tactics designed to impede ICE and CBP from getting criminal aliens off our streets and out of the United States. Why is the radical left so intent on protecting illegal aliens over U.S. citizens who are suffering the consequences of violent crime? To me, that is the most important question that remains unanswered. I now recognize Senator Padilla, the ranking member.